So
Yes, please do.
everybody's.
Please do, please do. Of course.
Otherwise, we won't be.
Thank you very much. So perhaps then, you could actually, for your own purpose, and for the purpose of this workshop, and it's being kept secret, right? Produce your own personal profile, saying receptive, choose skills, and then you enter the level which you think, as a speaker of German or French, or do we have any other language? Portuguese, Italian, yes. As a speaker of one of those languages, you are reading, listening, oral production, spoken interaction, and written production. So, could you just produce that? Just make a little note and say, Laura, and then it is French, and then it is receptive C2, and reading C2, listening C2, and all the way through C2, or perhaps slightly different.
Yeah, perhaps a productive would be A2.
Anyway, do it for yourself. Do it for yourself. By the way, you don't need to copy the slides. If you want to have them, I can give you your email address, and I can send you the file. Everybody got it? Okay, thank you. Now, you will have realized, looking at your own profiles, that hardly anybody will probably have the same level on all skills. Does anybody?
No.
So, In other words, if you don't, your students are quite unlikely that they do. It's just that in educational systems, I don't know yours, I'm talking about mine, as teachers we often presume we have to identify one speaker, one level, one user, one level, which is not the case. Quite simple. Fine. One first thing that we found out. There is hardly a speaker of a language which is not their mother tongue who is at the same level in all skills. Now let's look at different skills. In front of you, you've got 3 test tasks. Three tasks. Two questions here. What do these 3 tasks have in common? And where is the difference? This is one. Yeah. One and two. Yeah. 2 questions. Yeah. What do they have in common?
Type of question.
Multiple choice.
Pardon?
Multiple choice.
The format.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Test format. Yeah. All 3 are multiple choice exercises. What else do they have in common? Your English. Yeah. Thanks, Ramon. Thanks, Alfonso. What are these 3 tests, the 3 tasks about? Do they have the same topic? No. Are they about the same skill?
Yes.
Okay. So it's reading comprehension, multiple choice. That's all they have in common. Next question. What is the difference?
That one is a bit more complicated. It has 4 options, so I guess it's...
Okay, slightly different format, yes. But that's the format.
The level of difficulty with the questions.
Yeah. Okay, you can see
First
that.
one is easier.
The questions, yesterday it was sunny and this is fairly simple. No, I mean, you can answer the question if you understand yesterday and sunny.
All right, so we have a clear difference. We have a clear difference as far as the language of the question is
Yeah.
concerned, right?
The level of the task, the level of difficulty
Right.
of the task.
Yes. Anything else that's different?
Well, the length of the text.
Yeah.
All right, yes, quite obviously. Yeah.
And the degree of abstraction or concreteness.
Oh, you're touching upon something very interesting, Kathy.
This
Right,
is
the
what we
degree
have.
of abstraction, right?
Yeah.
If we look at the weather forecast, this is pretty straightforward, isn't it? And it is even supported, because it is supported by a map. This is visual support, and it's something that is not very abstract at all. And the vocabulary is the vocabulary of
The weather.
the weather, right? And then you need to use vocabulary, weather, language and match with geography, right? But geography is not really presented language-wise, but actually it's presented in a non-text mode and in a text mode. So we have support. Right, that's one thing. If we look at number 2, a winning idea,
It's like a personal experience.
all right, yes?
You know? It's talking about somebody's life,
Yeah.
his life story, telling what happened in his life.
When you say personal, what type of person is that?
Well, he's talking about his life, kind of biographical.
All right, okay, good.
Life history
Something which is close
to one's
to-
personal experience.
to one's personal experience, as you say, right? Number 3,
Number 3 is abstract. It's talking about communication as an abstract idea.
all right, okay, okay. So, what we see is, what is the difference? First difference, size. XS, small, medium, whatever, right? Size. Second difference, what could that be? We were talking about the language,
Abstraction.
well, abstraction, range.
Right.
Range. Next one. Kathy very nicely put it when she talked about the second task, familiarity.
Yeah.
And the last one, the marionette, the puppet.
Autonomy.
Yes. The degree of independence. So there are a few other markers, but those 4, to me, seem very central markers of a particular level. We are talking about how big, we are talking about how varied, we are talking about how familiar, and we are talking about how independent. And the whole range of levels might actually be defined by those 4 concepts. Number 1 here, this is comparatively small, right? It is, there's not a wide range of language involved. It's the weather language. This is familiar. People see weather reports. Not the first time that they see a map of England, and not the first time that they read or listen to a weather report. Independence, here, you don't need to be a lot of enormously independent to do this, right? There's not a lot of thinking involved. As you say, you combine visual, language of geography, and the language of weather, and then the tasks and the sentences are pretty straightforward. You don't even need to have to understand every single word. You can actually solve the problem even if you don't understand it. This is different here, and this is largely different there. So let us recall, trying to teach a little bit here. Let us recall, we have 4, among others, we have 4 central parameters which define a level. Size, range, degree of familiarity, degree of independence. Is there anything else which defines?
a particular level. What about the type of task?
Yes, but here we are moving away from teaching. We are moving into testing. These are testing papers, right? They may be used as teaching, but teaching rather training than teaching, right? But we are, basically these are testing papers. Type of task, yes, I agree. Some of us find it different, and your profiles show that production is probably more difficult for some than understanding, reception. So there are a few things, but basically this can be boiled down to 4 basic parameters. Now we have that thing called Common European Framework. And I understand you're familiar with it, more or less. So I can probably be a bit quick here. What was the idea behind the Common European Framework? Why was it produced? I keep asking that question because the fact that people hesitate to answer tells me that they have not the introductory paragraph of the paper, of the document. What most teachers have, they have jumped upon upon what?
The charts, the descriptors.
Upon the descriptors, of course.
The document is called Learning, Teaching and Assessment.
Yeah.
So I think it was, the original idea was to review the ways in which we're teaching, or the learning, teaching.
The
learning,
funny
teaching
thing is,
process of language.
the funny thing is that most people refer to the framework, I call it the framework, most people refer to the framework when they have problems as examiners. Funny, isn't it? The title doesn't talk about testing
So learning, teaching and assessment.
and assessment. And we said assessment and testing aren't necessarily the same thing, but it's about learning and it's about teaching. Why the hell have we been jumping, all of us, on this document as a means of helping us to become good examiners? When I was brought up at university, examining never really appeared on the curriculum. I got out a qualified teacher more or less qualified, prepared, but I was by no means prepared as an examiner. We hardly get any instruction. Probably your generation, you do. But examining is a trait, is a special competence. You may be an excellent examiner and probably have never taught or be a lousy teacher. And maybe the other way around. You may be a good teacher, really good teacher, but not at all what one would call a professional examiner. So we're having this sort of problem here. And the framework, when it was written, was about teaching, about learning a lot, and about assessment, but not about testing. And we use it as a basis for testing. Now, I'm putting things to the extreme now, as you will understand. Of course, you know and I know. But anyway, the original idea was to produce something, a common framework, which makes teaching and learning comparable across the borders of education, different educational systems. Because if you say, where do you teach, Laura?
Sorry,
Where do you teach?
where?
Where? Which city? Which town?
In Alcira.
Alcira.
Alcira. Yes.
Okay,
It's near here.
if Laura in Alcida has a student and she says this student is a 2, and how do you mark? Do you give grades?
Yes.
How many grades do you give?
It's from 1 to 10, so it's out of 10. And 6 is a pass.
Okay, so this student, Ramon, is 6
Mm-hmm.
in a particular class, right? Alfonso, you don't teach at the same school,
No.
but you may have a student who is 6 out of 10 as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Do we have, and I have such students, and you do, and people in Norway do, and others in Sicily. But is there any kind of guarantee that your student, my student, Laura's student, who all have the same grade, that grade reflects the same level of competence? No.
Doesn't even in the same school.
Not even in the same school, is it? I know. So, I'm breaking this from this big international scope. I'm now going down and say, not as you say, not even in the same school.
I'm not even the same teacher.
Anyway, yes, we are multiple personalities as well.
Yeah, it depends whether it's a Monday or a Friday very often.
3 or 5 or 6.
How many oral
No,
exams you've
we
done
see the
already?
Exactly.
We see the point, don't we? We see the point. So, now this document here is an attempt to provide what is, as it is called, a framework within which we can actually place different levels of competence and make them more comparable. I will later try to talk a little bit about qualification and about the international labour market, for instance. And it's high time that we have something which allows us to relate things and to use the same language or a similar language when we describe the same thing. So it's about comparability and transparency of educational objectives. This goes into curriculum design, of qualifications, because your student will probably, your German student of German, right? Or you don't teach German, do you teach German?
No.
But if you taught German, right? Your German student, who you say is 6 out of 10, will probably apply for a position, for a job somewhere. And if he or she has got a paper saying this student is 6 out of 10, and that means so and so, it's much better and makes people comparable. So we get of transparency, transparency of educational objectives, of qualifications, and also of processes, of courses, course design, right? Courses, and if we look at our textbooks, which we use now, I don't know your textbooks, but I'm sure this applies to these books as well. Textbooks are very much based on that system. So they allow us to control, to define, to measure, analyze, etc., etc. And if a textbook, a good textbook, says it's at A2 level, and another textbook is at A2 level, you can actually compare, and the longer we move on, the more we move on, the more similar textbooks become to each other. And we can also use textbooks which are probably not produced for an international market, not for a Spanish market only. So there's a lot of good that this document has brought along. There are 2 words which come into play: validity and recognition. There's something which is valid. If something is valid, it means that under different circumstances, it shows the same result. If your student 6 out of 10, if this is a valid mark, your student would most likely get the same mark in Alphonse's class. You know what I mean? And probably in Kathy's as well. It would be a valid judgment. Do we like this? Teachers that we are. Do we all like it? At the bottom of our hearts? Yes, you say yes. All of us, I think, will say yes. But isn't there that inner feeling that it's me and my student? And I know some of us still have that feeling. It's certainly probably my generation. And we've never had that. And we have established a very, very almost intimate relationship with our classes, with our students. And he or she does that fine because I have told and taught. Right? And you measure as students, you used to measure, I must say, you used to measure, you're smiling, Pauline, you used to measure a student's performance according to how well he or she did what you expected from him or her. So there is that personal element, which is natural about teaching, nothing wrong about it, if you ask me. But this is not transparent. This is not transparent. So ideally, we have that instrument as some kind of an instrument, a tool of control, a tool of orientation, a tool of transparency. And that's what it was meant to be. So, we have that thing called Common European Framework. And this is misleading, by the way. This implies that this is steps that we are climbing. It is not steps. It is a slope. One slope. And it's a very slippery slope. Because you know, with your languages, other languages other than Spanish or English, if you don't keep fit, you will slide back, right? And then climb back again and slide down like Sisyphus. Anyway, so, but we have that system. I don't know how well you are familiar with the thing called European Language Portfolio. Does that ring a bell? I would thoroughly recommend to Google it. It's a document which is, well, it's a concept which invites local organizations to translate virtually framework into student speak. Because the framework, let's face it, is not an easy read. It's not an easy read for teachers, and it's an impossible read for parents, and it is not an easy read for students either. So, let's face it. And this is why people thought we need to produce something which fully correlates with the concept of the European framework, but which is learner-oriented. The framework is expert-oriented. The European Language Portfolio is learner-oriented. But it uses, absolutely, it uses the system of the concept of the framework. So, those who haven't done, please go for it. It's a very useful document. I've used it, I've co-authored the Austrian version of it, and it's a very complex piece of document. You may be familiar with the Europass, for instance. This Europass is one element of the language portfolio. The basic idea is to help students identify their own language level and help students to define their own learning objectives and help students to document what they have done. So, and then we have curricula, national standards and profiles. And all three, in a way, correlate, and that's a good thing. That's why we are here, which is a good thing. You know that. You know that? There are English expressions of the different levels. Breakthrough, my Spanish has not yet reached breakthrough. Wastage, we will look at. Threshold. Actually, the whole thing started by defining threshold. And threshold is the level as a threshold. There's no threshold, right? But it is, when you enter a new room, you have to step across something. You've got to step across the threshold. And this is the threshold level which takes you into independence. So this is where the whole thing started. And then people began to work their way upwards and downwards, step by step. So we have those levels. And there are these 6 levels may be grouped into 3 categories. Some people say they may be grouped into 9. But let's be simple. Basic, and the letter is A. For basic, I don't know why. And then there is independent, and the letter is B for independent. And then there is proficient, and the letter is C. Now, as I said, it's not steps, it's a slope. And what it also is, it's not built in the void, it's built upon what they call situations or domains. That means where actually, in which context are you able to produce and to use language. And for instance, when we just remember the 3 reading texts we have. What is close to one's life? What is almost personal? Why do textbooks start about my family, my town, my school, my pet? Why do textbooks start? Because this is personal, this is close. Occupational, job, world of work, and the world of education. And then we have public. So we might even go into a little bit more depth when we look at our own profiles, the one you've noted, right? And say, does this apply to all 3 categories? Probably it does. But probably it does not. Because let's say occupational, the language of information technology is different from the language of tourism. There's overlaps, of course, thousands of overlaps. But here we are going into special purposes, languages for special domains, right? Okay, here we are. Now, today we'll be looking at 2 levels in particular. And it's not an easy choice that you've given me, because it's just on the break between basic and independent. So, as a matter of fact, if we can answer at the end of the day, if we can answer what stands for independent use at the lowest independent level, then we have done our job. By the way, independent goes up to Vantage. B2, those who teach B2, in a B2 environment, you never ever leave what is familiar in some way or other. You ask your learner to be independent, yes, but you never confront your learner with something, especially in test situations, with something that he or she has never met before. That's C. This is familiar all the way through. But there may be basic level, and there may be more than basic, independent, but it's familiar. It's not new. So, any comments so far? Does it make sense? Good. Now I have some work for you. Just to describe those levels in some more detail. I know very little about you, where do you teach, Lydia? You teach English? And where here in this school?
I'm student.
Ah. And which level do you teach? All levels.
A1.
A1?
A1.
Uh-huh. You've got. We can look at that together. Let's look at way stage first. I've tried to. The system of that handout is a lot of text, of course, sorry about that. But there are also 2 icons, 2 visuals on each, linked to each level. Now, if you look at the icons linked to way stage, what do they stand, what do they signal? Just the icons. It's socializing, it's holding hands, it's communicating, and second one, out and about, it's trying to get out of school, right? To survive in a non-schoolish environment. Survive. Next one, threshold. taking things, information into one's head, information, and changing information. So this is not here, A2, this is not the case. In B1 we have that, and we also have that problem of, we have also have that competence for B1 of putting things into order, organizing a little bit. When we asked, I remember when we looked at what makes the difference of levels, we said size, range, degree of familiarity, degree of independence. We could also have added organizing competence. At A2 level, people can probably say, I have got 4 pets. I have 4 pets, they would say. A cat, 2 dogs, a canary, and what else? Another dog. That would be just a list of things. But you wouldn't be able to say, the cat is much older than the dog. You could say that, right? But yeah, you could say, I got the cat from my granny. With help. Whereas at B1 level, one would expect somebody to put things to express things in a more organized way. So, let's stick to wastage. And early this morning you said that you would want to know what is a particular level, what can a person do at a particular level. This is probably an answer, right? And says you've got social functions, very limited social functions, but you do have social functions. And here we have some of those. Simple forms of greeting. Ask how they are. Very short social exchanges. Sorry about the typos, I didn't realize they were there. Questions about what do you do, where do you work, what do you do in your free time. Invitations. Would you like to probably, or let's go to the cinema. What do you do in your free time, hobbies, interests? Would you like, perhaps, make an offer? Or what about? But that asks for the Gerald.
Yeah.
And then there is getting out and about. As I said, just survive outside a school environment. Do a little bit of shopping. Post a letter, a parcel, say where that should go, how much it costs. Get simple information about traveling. Ask for basic information. ¿Dónde está la dirección? Ask and give directions, right? But in the neighborhood, right? Where people is at home. Go down, turn right. Buy tickets and ask for everyday services, such as, what could that be? Think of things that you teach. What can your A2 students ask for? Have you got a cigarette?
Yeah.
Or What else? Simple things anyway, right? Now, there is not one single A2. There is, to make things a little bit confusing, there is what they call a strong wastage. And that goes up towards B1 level. And that is about a more active participation. But, and I hasten to add that but, at B2 level, at A2 level, you are not independent, you need help. And in other words, if you test somebody at B2 level, don't ask him or her to be independent. Right? At that level, people need help, support, visual support, language support, vocabulary, phrases. They need that support. Otherwise, you test them at a much higher level. And you will be disappointed by the results. So, give it some assistance and limitations. And there are some of those expressions. The first bullet point here is a tricky one. Initiate, maintain, and close simple, restricted, face-to-face conversation. These are all quotes from the text, right? And this is, in my opinion, is one of the classic examples of the level at which, language level, at which that document was produced, and the language level of those who we expect to read that, probably, right? So, because an A2 speaker will never understand that. They'll never understand what initiate, maintain, and close simple, restricted, face-to-face conversations, right? So, it's not written for learners. But to begin, maintain and finish and close, that's fine. Make him herself understood in predictable everyday situations, etc., etc. And it's about little monologues. Little. About very, very familiar things. Because after all, we have that spoken production element where we ask people to speak without interruption. To speak, give a little presentation if you want. So here we are. I'm aware of time and I would like us to move on a little bit before we go for a break. I apologize, sorry, yes?
Can I just say something?
Yes, of course, please do.
Are we asking for this on our tests, like for a strong wastage student? Not A2, but strong.
We're testing
Are
what
we testing this
We're
instead of,
testing
you know,
We're asking for
A2 plus instead of, you know, because like monologues and stuff, it's just like strong wastage instead of, I mean, I was just asking if you know the same way. Okay.
Well, it should be told what is a short presentation, because our A2 speaking task, well, it sure depends on in comparison to what. But yes, I agree with you.
Okay.
2 minutes.
And not only that, but also the interpretations of the examiners
Yeah.
for oral
Yes.
performances. So,
Perhaps I should add something. And this goes into testing.
yeah.
Testing is, I think we need to be aware of the purpose of testing.
Yeah.
There are different purposes of testing. In the afternoon I will look at one or two. There's the purpose of testing for orientation. So to help a learner understand where his or her strengths and weaknesses are. full stop. There are tests for placement which are similar. And you do that test before you enter a new course, just to see where you are and where you move on, where you should move on. And there are tests that qualify. That qualify to move on into the next class, next school, academy, university, whatever. So these are different, there are more different types of tests. But those three perhaps, or even those two, orient